So the agenda for today, I will give a quick introduction to the European Urban Initiative and our capacity building activities. Then I will present the main features and the application process for city-to-city exchanges. After that, I will hand over to Zoe, who will take you through peer reviews and how to apply. Zoe will recap on the key dates for the calls and upcoming opportunities and the different assistance for applicants tools. And then we will move to the questions and answer part of this webinar. So, the European Urban Initiative. The 2021-2027 Cohesion Policy legislative package included the establishment of the European Urban Initiative, or the EUI, as a novel EU instrument. The EUI is managed indirectly by DG Regional and Urban Policy as part of the European Commission, and the initiative has been entrusted to the Hauts-de-France region here in France for the day-to-day management. So there is a permanent secretariat set up in Lille that handles the day-to-day operation of the EUI. EUI has a total ERDF budget of €450 million for this programming period, and the initiative is building on several past initiatives from the last programming period. So the Urban Innovative Actions Initiative, the Urban Development Network, which was managed by the European Commission, the Urban Agenda for the EU and the partnerships, and URBACT 4 programme. So all of these initiatives are being brought together, synergised and coordinated within the European Urban Initiative. In terms of the objectives of the initiative, there are a few key points worth mentioning. The first is that EUI is there to provide funding for innovative pilot projects. So these projects help identify and test innovative, transferable, scalable solutions to sustainable urban development problems that are relevant at EU level. In terms of capacity building, we have the objective to help cities build their capacity for sustainable urban development. And there is a third strand also dedicated to communicating, disseminating knowledge from the implemented projects and activities and building on those lessons learned and their experiences. So moving on to capacity building specifically. In the next few slides, I'll present the main target group, the two objectives, and the three activities which have launched recently under EUI Capacity Building. To set the scene firstly for EUI Capacity Building, it's worth providing the context for sustainable urban development. We're referring to a few key documents when defining sustainable urban development. The first is the Article 11 of the European Regional Development Fund regulation. So this Article 11, Sustainable Urban Development, refers to the ring fencing of a particular amount of ERDF funding for projects that are to be directly implemented by cities in line with sustainable urban development strategies. So this is a very important reference for capacity building, and these Article 11 cities that are concerned by this regulation are one of our core target groups. We're also very much in line and aiming to build links with the new Leipzig Charter, pointing to the importance of integrated place-based strategies and functional urban area approaches. And we're building very much on the Handbook for Sustainable Urban Development Strategies that has been produced by the European Commission's Joint Research Centre, which offers a framework for cities that are developing sustainable urban development strategies. What we know is that capacity building to address these challenges will be key to ensuring that these sustainable urban development strategies and the related investments deliver good results. So against this backdrop, I'm going to present to you now the target group, the objectives and the activities that we've designed for EUI capacity building. So the overall target group is EU cities of all sizes involved or interested in sustainable urban development within cohesion policy. We have the twin objectives of improving the capacities of cities to design and implement SUD strategies, policies and practices in an integrated, participative way, and indeed to improve the quality of the design and overall implementation of those strategies, policies and practices themselves. So it's about helping the individuals and the institutions involved in this SUD development and also the policy instruments and strategies deriving from their work. In terms of the 3 new activities, this webinar is specifically focusing on city-to-city exchanges and peer reviews, so I won't say much about these just now, but I will say a word about the third piece of the puzzle that you see on the screen, and this is the capacity building event. So capacity building events will be organised by EUI in order to create a community of practice for cities that are involved in sustainable urban development within cohesion policy. The aim is to create a dialogue with the European Commission and to allow urban authorities, managing authorities and key stakeholders to come together and discuss issues of thematic or operational importance to these processes. These events could be organised at EU level, targeting a cluster of member states, or indeed country-specific events. So with that, I will move on to the main content of city-to-city exchanges. So in this part, I'm going to talk about the main features of the city-to-city exchanges and how to apply. So what is a city-to-city exchange? A city-to-city exchange brings together an urban authority that's facing a specific implementation challenge related to SUD, who we call the applicant. And this applicant comes together with another urban authority from a different EU member state that has the expertise to help tackle this challenge. So that's the peer. And the applicant and the peer together carry out a short, quickly implemented visit. It's designed by the applicant according to their needs, and the aim of this visit is to improve the capacity of the applicant to tackle the specified challenge through a process of peer learning. So when we refer to the exchange being bottom-up, it refers to the fact that the exchange is initiated by the applicant, designed by the applicant, and targeting the needs of the applicant. So in terms of how the exchanges are structured, they bring together 1 to 2 peer cities from other member states with the expertise needed to address the challenge. In principle, the exchanges can be bilateral between the applicant and the peer, but indeed a second peer city can be involved if justified in the application form as being needed to tackle the challenge. Each exchange can consist of 1 to 3 individual events. They need to be implemented over a 5-month period, and each of these events can be between 2 and 5 days duration. There are 3 possible visits. Three possible formats for the events. The first is an incoming visit. So in an incoming visit, the 1 or 2 peers come to the applicant city and study on site the challenge and provide their inputs in the applicant city. Then there is the outgoing visit. This is where the applicant goes to visit one of the peers, and they may be joined by the other peer city if justified in the application form. There's also a possibility to organise an online meeting as a follow-up to an in-person visit. So there is a 1 online meeting possibility per exchange. In terms of who may apply for city-to-city exchanges, the applicants must be urban authorities within EU member states. So an urban authority in this context is a local administrative unit defined as city, town or suburb with DGURBA code 1 or 2. Or an urban authority could be also a grouping of urban authorities with legal status of organised agglomeration composed by local administrative units, where the majority of inhabitants live in local administrative units defined as cities, towns or suburbs, DGURBA code 1 or 2. There's no minimum population requirement for the city, town or suburb that would participate, but it is required that all applicants demonstrate an interest or involvement in integrated place-based approaches to SUD in the application form. In terms of who may participate as peers, the same conditions apply in that it needs to be an urban authority. However, what's unique is that the peer must come from a different EU member state to the applicant. In addition, the peers must demonstrate that they have expertise and experience needed to address the applicant's challenge. It's important to identify that the responsibility is on the applicant to identify the peers in advance and to list them in the application form. As to why you should participate as a peer, Even if the exchange is aimed at building the capacity of the applicant primarily, we know from experience that the peers also enjoy secondary capacity building benefits by participating in the exchange and seeing how other cities approach the challenge and provide different solutions. Peers will also enjoy visibility and networking opportunities. EUI will be promoting the most active and impactful peers. And also, it can be interesting to participate as a peer because we provide dedicated financing to support your participation through an easy to understand lump sum basis. In terms of the support available, I'll speak now about the type of funding that we offer for the applicants and peers. So for the applicant city, we can cover travel, accommodation and subsistence costs for up to 4 people from the applicant city. This covers at least one staff member from the urban authority in the applicant city, but it can also cover the participation of stakeholders from the applicant city. These stakeholders would need to be included in the budget of the urban authority, and also the urban authority would be required to transfer the funds to the stakeholder after the reimbursement has been carried out. For the peer city, again, we can cover travel, accommodation and subsistence for up to 2 people. Again, at least one of these people must be from an urban authority, but the other person may be from a stakeholder. And in addition to this cost, we also provide a daily rate covering staff time for the duration of the city-to-city exchange for the up to 2 people that would participate from the peer. This daily rate is €350 per day. In addition to the financial support, EUI can appoint a city-to-city exchange moderator to facilitate the exchange and learning process. We have a catalogue of moderators identified and ready to be operationalized to support your exchange. They have a range of experience across different thematic areas related to sustainable urban development, and all of them have demonstrated a strong experience and flair for facilitating and designing learning experiences. So the moderator would get on board when finalizing the agenda for the exchange, and they would help you on site in moderating the learning experience and ensuring that the advice provided by the peers is properly adjusted to the context of the applicant. I mentioned earlier that the responsibility is on the applicant to identify the peers. However, we do provide one service to help facilitate contact among certain urban authorities. So if you are interested in being put in touch with an urban authority involved in innovative actions projects or in urban agenda for the EU partnerships, we are able to facilitate that directly with a specific form that Zoe will share at the end. In terms of the selection process for city-to-city exchanges, applications are submitted on a rolling basis. So as we will recap later, the call is open now. It's open until the 17th of November. However, we encourage you to submit your application as soon as possible because we will be evaluating it and notifying applicants of approval on a rolling basis. So the selection process is organised along the following steps. First, there is a prioritization done, which determines how fast your application is treated in line with our specific key target groups. We'll present these in a minute. Then we carry out an eligibility check and a quality evaluation. We're supported by a team of experts in carrying out this process, and it is the EUI Permanent Secretariat that takes the final decision. As I said, applicants are notified of the decision on a rolling basis, and this happens within 4 weeks of submitting an application, which means in line with the bottom-up, quickly implemented, fast character of the visit, you can be on the ground exchanging very quickly after applying for an exchange. In terms of the prioritization, as I said, this is about determining the speed with which your application will be evaluated. So we have a special prioritization for urban authorities in less developed regions as a first priority, and those in transition regions as a second priority. We're also prioritizing urban authorities that have less than 500,000 inhabitants. We're prioritizing those that have participated already in an EUI peer review, those that have not yet benefited from a city-to-city exchange, or those that are resubmitting a previously rejected application. In terms of the eligibility check, there are a number of points that need to be verified. Firstly, that the application is submitted before the deadline. Also, that the applicant and peers are eligible urban authorities located in an EU member state. We check that the peers come from different EU member states. We check that the applicant and its institution comply with requirements on exclusion from access to funding, which you can see described in the guidance. And we also check that the applicant and the peers have endorsed the application with the declaration that you find at the end of the application form. It's a tick box declaration to be confirmed by the authorised signatory of the institution. Then we pass to the quality evaluation. So the first category relates to the challenge addressed. We're checking that your application focuses on a challenge related to designing and implementing sustainable urban development within cohesion policy. So we're looking to see that you've described relevant thematic and operational considerations in your challenge and that it's sufficiently focused for a productive exchange. In case you have selected that more than one event should take place, or in case you have selected an online event as part of your options, we would check to see that these are justified in the application form by the challenge. Then, in terms of your motivation for applying, in this category, we need to verify that the applicant has demonstrated an involvement or an interest in integrated place-based approaches or the design and implementation of SUD strategies. We also look to see how the applicant explains how they will benefit from the exchange. So for this, we're looking to see that you anticipate that your policy framework will be improved along with the capacities of the applicant institution. And we also check that the type of outputs listed are coherent with the nature and focus of the exchange. So exchanges are about peer learning between different urban authorities. So outputs such as a list of recommendations or identifying a selection of good practices or reviewing a particular document could be consistent with the exchange. But any detailed commercial training or development of studies or other type of consultancy work goes beyond the scope of an exchange and cannot be supported. Finally, as part of the quality evaluation, we're also checking elements related to the peers. So we're checking that the peer expertise is coherent with the challenge described by the applicant so that we understand why these peers have been identified. In case you have identified 2 peer cities and not one, we need to ensure that this is justified. And we need to ensure that each peer is involved in at least one visit so that there's no phantom peers in the application form. So moving on to the issue of contracting. After the city-to-city exchange application has been approved, the urban authorities involved are required to sign a grant agreement with the entrusted entity. This is a very light contractual framework that specifies the maximum amount of ERDF that can be granted based on the features identified in the exchange and all of the conditions under which the exchange is approved. So this provides the legal basis for the funding. And because these are bottom-up activities, because the Permanent Secretariat won't be participating in the exchange directly, this gives a legal basis to guarantee that the activity will be implemented as planned and to give us a basis to release the reimbursement if it's implemented as expected. This agreement will be shared with the beneficiary. So the applicant becomes the main beneficiary upon approval. So they will receive the agreement to be returned and signed by the urban authorities by the time of submitting the reimbursement form at the latest. So after the exchange takes place, we would expect the urban authority that is the applicant to provide a report summarising what happened in the exchange. It's a rather light report, and with the approval of this report, we're able to treat the reimbursement form, provided that this grant agreement has been returned. So, how to apply for a city-to-city exchange? I mentioned it already, but the call is open now. It will remain open until the 17th of November 2023 at noon. And as I said, we are treating the applications on a rolling basis. So within 4 weeks of submitting your application, you may be notified of the decision. There is an EU survey set up which allows you to fill in the application form. There is a courtesy application form available in Word format. You can also see the Excel file that allows you to calculate the maximum budget that will be available. And you have also the guidance that is available on the website that provides the full and complete conditions about city-to-city exchanges. The last point, the form, relates to requesting contact with urban authorities already involved in innovative actions or urban agenda for the EU partnerships in case this is needed to support your application. So I'll now show you quickly what the application form looks like so you have a sense of how these criteria will be filled out by any applicants. So first, there's a section A where you provide general information, so a short title summarizing the content of your exchange. Then we ask if this application is a follow-up to a peer review or a resubmission of a previously rejected application, because this allows us to prioritize your application if relevant. Then we ask for some more information, the NUTS 3 code of the Urban Authority for statistical purposes. We ask you to select the legal status of the applicant urban authority and to provide the total number of inhabitants for the applicant urban authority. Again, for statistical purposes, we're collecting whether the applicant urban authority is concerned by Article 11 of the ERDF regulation that I spoke about in the beginning. And we're also asking applicants to indicate if they're involved in other EU cooperation related to sustainable urban development. So there's a number of institutions involved in the steering group of the European Urban Initiative, and we like to provide feedback on to what extent the different urban authorities involved in those networks are participating in our activities. Then we move on to the section where you need to name the policy instrument related to sustainable urban development that will be improved thanks to this exchange. So this allows us to understand that your challenge is really anchored in one of the key documents related to sustainable urban development. So this could be your sustainable urban development strategy, your integrated territorial investment strategy, community-led local development strategy, or perhaps the European Regional Development Fund operational program itself. What you can see now on the slide is an overview of the Excel file, which we call the work plan and budget, which allows you to calculate the maximum number of ERDF that can be provided for the exchange. So you will have to fill in only the green fields that you will see in the following slides. So certain information needs to be repeated, so the title of the exchange. But then as we go to the next slide, you can see that we ask for some additional information. So we ask for instance, the location of each of the different exchanges, the event type. So this is where you select the format, the month where the exchange would take place, and the year, the duration, the location. And all of this, along with the number of participants per event, will calculate the amount of ERDF that can be allocated on this lump sum basis to each of the urban authorities. In terms of the per diem, it's worth mentioning that by selecting the duration of your exchange, there will be a rate applied depending on the country where the event takes place. So we are working with a standardized list of per diem rates drawn from the European Commission. Again, in terms of travel costs, we have unit rates per distance band, which allows the form to calculate based on your home city and the location of your event, how much can be provided to support the participants doing this journey. Of course, by selecting the number of participants, the form also calculates how much staff costs can be paid to the peers. So again, this €350 per day daily rate that can be provided for up to 2 participants from the peer city. It's worth mentioning that the ERDF provided is 100%. There is no co-financing expected from the participants. So at the end of the application form, there is this endorsement section whereby the institution needs to confirm that they understand the conditions of the city-to-city exchange, will support the implementation if the application is approved, and that this endorsement has been given by an authorized signatory. So this box needs to be ticked, and it is a mandatory field. The urban authorities for the applicant and also the Peer 1 and Peer 2, if applicable, will need to have this endorsement filled out. So with that, we've come to the end of the content on the city-to-city exchange. I'll take this opportunity just to remind you about Slido. So if you haven't already, we invite you to connect to Slido with the code that you see on the screen, or maybe by scanning the QR code that you see and entering any questions you have about city-to-city exchanges. I'll just remind you again, it'd be very helpful for us if you can say if your question is about city-to-city exchange or peer review, because the conditions are different for the two activities. So this will help us answer your question in the best possible way when we get to the end. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Zoe. Zoe is going to continue now the presentation about peer reviews. And after that, I will come back to answer any questions in the questions and answer time. Thank you so much. Over to you, Zoe.
So, hello everyone. It's great to see so many people joining our webinar. So I'll present to you the main features of a peer review, how to apply to be a city under review, and how to apply to be a peer in our peer reviews. So first and foremost, what is a peer review? A peer review is a two-day event in person that brings together cities under review and peers. Peers are understood as fellow urban practitioners. Cities under review are benchmarking the Sustainable Urban Development Strategies, or SUD strategies, and are getting insights, recommendation, and advice on their strategy from the peers. The aim is to improve the capacity of cities under review in designing and implementing their strategy. So the main focus of the activity is really sustainable urban development strategies as defined by cohesion policy and Article 11 of the current ERDF regulation. So that means that the strategies are integrated, participatory, and place-based. We are following a fixed methodology that is implemented within 4 to 6 months, depending on the date of the peer review. So as part of the methodology, we are inviting cities under review to define 3 guiding questions on the challenges they are facing when they are designing or when they are implementing their SUD strategy. So to provide a common framework, cities under review are asked to build their guiding questions on the 6 building blocks of the Handbook for Sustainable Urban Development Strategy that was developed by the Joint Research Center. So the 6 building blocks are namely strategic dimension, territorial focus, governance, cross-sectoral integration, funding and finance, and the final one is monitoring. We are also asking cities under review to do a SAT for SUD analysis. So it's the self-assessment tool for sustainable urban development that was also developed by the GRC, so the Joint Research Center. And we are asking cities under review to base their guiding questions on the results. So the SAT for SUD aims at helping cities assess the strengths and the weaknesses of their SUD strategy as defined by cohesion policy. So it's a good starting point to have a common framework and a common language. Once the cities under review have been selected, we are asking them to consult with the local stakeholders that are designing or participating in the strategy to validate the 3 guiding questions. For the peer review event, we will have 3 separate sessions that are each addressing one of the guiding questions. At the table, there will be up to 4 staff members from the city under review, up to 4 peers, and 2 EUI peer review experts. During the discussion, the peers are asked to 1. Reframe the question, share relevant experiences, and provide insights and recommendations. We have 5 implementation steps. So the first one is the call for application for cities under review, during which we are asking potential cities under review to apply with their SAT for SUD analysis. So we have a current call open, and that will close on the 29th of May for cities under review to be peer reviewed in autumn-winter 2023. Then we have the second phase, so the call for peers that opens for 4 weeks, during which we are matching cities under review and peers. And so for that, we have an open call for our first peer review. So we are looking for peers for our first EUI peer review that will take place on the 28th-29th of June in Thessaloniki. The third implementation step is the content preparation, so during which we are asking cities under review to draft a background paper that is explaining the context of the city, but also the context of the strategy, and detailing a bit more on the guiding questions and the challenges they are facing. Peers are then asked to read the background paper, and then cities under review and peers are expected to attend a preparatory webinar during which they will first discuss the guiding questions and discuss expectation during the peer review. After the preparatory webinar, the peers are asked to prepare a list of use cases to provide use cases and insights to the peers, to the cities under review. Then we come to the peer review event in itself. So it's a 2-day event that is in person, and that during which, cities under review and peers will discuss really the guiding question. After the event, the cities under review will receive an expert's report, so that is drafted by the EUI peer review expert, explaining the main recommendation and the main outcomes of the discussion. The cities under review will be then asked to submit a follow-up report that is, building on the expert report within 2 months. After 6 months, we'll then ask the participating cities to participate in a follow-up webinar during which the cities under review will explain how they integrated the recommendation and how the peer review was useful to them. In parallel to these follow-up activities, cities under review and peers are encouraged to apply to our other capacity building activities. So either to apply to a city-to-city exchange or to participate in one of our capacity building events. So we will also provide peer support. That's really the core of the peer review. Peers are staff members from urban authorities that are experienced in the design and the implementation of sustainable urban development strategies. They apply as individual, so they are representing their urban authority, but the urban authority in itself is not a peer. There will be up to 4 peers per city under review, and their expected contribution is the review of the background paper and providing recommendation during the event. The peers are really a key element of success, and so their active involvement is very important. That's why we are matching the cities under review and the peers first on the relevance of their interest and experience, but also on the quality of the motivation of the peer. We are providing additional support. So the first one is the expert support. So there will be 2 EUI peer review experts allocated to a city under review. They are asked to support the city under review throughout the whole process. So that includes supporting the preparation of the documents, both the background paper and the presentation. They are also supporting the peers in the preparation of their insights. They will be moderating the event and they'll draft the first version of the follow-up report. We are also providing financial support both for the peers and the city under review. It will come in the form of a lump sum and no co-financing is required. For cities under review, the staff of both the urban authorities and the stakeholder organization may have their expenses covered as long as the person from the urban authority that is in charge of the SUD strategy is participating. The financial support is always reimbursed to the urban authority of the city under review, and the urban authority of the city under review is then responsible in setting reimbursement arrangements with their stakeholders. What is covered are travel costs for up to 4 people, and per diems covering 3 days for up to 4 people. For the peers, so their travel cost is also covered, as well as their per diem, but we also included up to 5 days of staff costs in our financial support. So, how to apply to be a city under review? First, in terms of eligibility, the key dates of the call are the 29th of May. That's when the call for cities under review will close. We'll be able to announce as early as possible to the selected cities under review that they've been selected on the 12th of June. We'll be able to confirm the dates and the location of the peer review for autumn-winter 2023 on the 24th of June. That's when we'll also start the content preparation. Only applications that have been submitted through EU survey will be declared eligible. So you can see the link on the slides, and that will share also in the chat. We have a courtesy application form that is available in Word format so that you can more easily circulate and prepare your application. But as said earlier, only applications that have been submitted through EU survey will be evaluated. You also have guidance on the EUI website and additional information. So in terms of eligibility criteria, cities under review have to be urban authorities that are locating within EU member states. They have to be Article 11 cities. So that means that they are urban authorities that are designing or updating or implementing a set strategy in line with Article 11 of the current ERDF regulation. We have set up prioritization criteria. So what we call the newly appointed Article 11 cities. So that means that it's cities that have not developed a set strategy in the past programming period. Our second prioritization criteria is cities with less than 500,000 inhabitants, cities that are located in less developed regions or transition regions, and cities that did not benefit from a peer review in the past, so either a UDN peer review or a peer review organized by the GRC. We are selecting the application with 2 evaluations, first the eligibility check and then the quality evaluation. So the eligibility check will verify the eligibility of the application form so that it has been properly filled out and properly submitted, and the eligibility of the applicant's institution to be a city under review. If the applicant is declared eligible, we move on to the quality evaluation. So we have 4 quality criteria and the prioritization score. The prioritization score is defined by the prioritization criteria that were mentioned in the slide before. Our first quality criteria is the challenge definition and coherence. So that includes the description of the challenges, the definition of the guiding question, and the coherence and consistency of the challenges, the guiding questions, with the result of the SAD for SUD analysis. The second quality criteria is the consistency with Article 11. So that means that we are checking that the application is consistent with the context and the changes of SUD as understood within Article 11 of the regulation. We are also able to clearly identify the SUD strategy that will be reviewed, that the status and the timeline of the SUD strategy are also coherent. The third quality criteria is the motivation and building of capacities. So that means that we're checking that the applicant has clearly described what they are expecting to gain from the activity, and that they have well understood the overall goal of capacity building and peer learning. The last quality criteria is the maturity of the SUD strategy, and it relates more to a timing criteria. So sustainable urban development strategies should be reviewed at strategic moments in the design and the implementation phases. So that means that we'll assess the status and the timeline of the applicant's strategy to ensure that the strategy from approved application are reviewed at an impactful and decisive moment. The application form is composed of three main parts. So the first one is information on the applicant. So we'll ask the applicant to provide standard information. So for instance, the number of inhabitants, information on involvement of the urban authorities in said strategy. So for instance, checking if the applicant is indeed an Article 11 city, and information on EU cooperation related to sustainable urban development. The second part is challenges and motivation. That's where we'll ask the applicant to upload the SAT for SUD and to define the three guiding questions to be addressed. We'll also ask the applicant to provide information on the participant and to indicate their logistical preferences. So for instance, if they'd like to be a host city or not. The last part is the confirmation of endorsement. So that's a very important part because that's where we are that's a requirement for all application. We are asking applications to be endorsed by an authorized signatory, so that someone who has delegation and power to engage the legal person of the application. And as I said, it's a very important field as it's the legal basis for the activity. So in the next slide, you will see some screenshots of the EU survey application form. So as you can see, for instance, on part A, there are several tick boxes asking if the city is involved in Article 11, if the city was involved in Article 7. So it's tick boxes and free text fields that help us prioritize the application, but it's also text that is helping us through for statistical purposes. So you can see here the application form, the part B, where we're asking you to name the SUD strategy, to upload the SAT for SUD results, and so on. So as you can see, there are characters limits. So they indicate the maximum number of characters that are allowed, but you don't need to fill all of the maximum character. It's more of an indication than something that is mandatory. So we have some advice to draft your guiding questions. So the first one is really to think of what you are expecting to gain. So what are the advice you would like to receive when you are designing your guiding questions? And you have to remain realistic as it's a discussion based and that peers may not able to solve all of your challenges. It's important also that you focus on the strategy design and that you really build your experience as well a policymaker or a strategy maker. It's also important that you build your questions on real issues, so really the issues that you are facing as a policy maker and the issues that your city is facing. So it's good to have some context to your questions, and that will help you to be clear when you are drafting your guiding question. It's also good to get familiar with the Handbook for Sustainable Urban Development Strategies, as it gives you a common understanding with the peers and with us to better understand the guiding questions and the challenges you are facing. Lastly, the self-assessment tool is a good starting point as it enables you to assess the strategy and the challenges you are facing in the framework of cohesion policy. So here you can see the third part, so part C, that is the confirmation of endorsement. So it's a tick box, and we will ask you also to provide contact details of the authorized signatory. You will receive the notification letter, so the person that is the main contact point, and the authorized signatory will also receive the notification letter, whether it's approved or rejected. We are also planning call for peers within the peer review activity. So we've just opened our first call for peers. It will target people that are interested in being a peer for the first EUI peer review, which will take place in Thessaloniki on the 28th, 29th of June. The first call for peers will close on the 30th of May, and selected peers will be notified starting from the 7th of June. We will open a second call for peers, and this time it will target people that are interested in being a peer for the autumn-winter 2023 peer review. The second call for peers will open following the outcomes of the call for cities under review, so that's indicatively end of June. Applicants to the call for peers are staff members from urban authorities that are located in EU member states. Peers are applying as individual. So there are staff members that are experienced and involved in the design or implementation of a such strategy that was either in line with Article 7 of the past ERDF regulation, or that is in line with Article 11 of the current ERDF regulation. No more than 2 peers from the same urban authority may attend the same peer review event. And so we have this requirement to have a diversity of experiences shared with the cities under review. We are selecting the peers with, well, still the two-step approach. So first we are checking their eligibility. So that means that the application form has been properly submitted and filled out, and that the applicant is meeting the eligibility criteria. Then we have 2 quality criteria. The first one is the expertise and interest. So that means that the applicant has clearly justified why they would be suitable to act as a peer. And so justification may include past and current experiences, best or promising practices that they are implementing within their strategy, and similarities in the context or faced challenges. The second criteria is the motivation and building of capacities. The applicant has clearly described their motivation. So the applicant has well understood what they are expecting to gain and well understood the goal of peer learning. Once the application have been evaluated and the applicant have been selected, we are matching the cities under review with the peers, and that will be done with the support of peer review experts. So matches are based on the interest of the peers. So we will not match peers with cities under review that are addressing guiding questions out of their scope of interest. We are also matching the peers based on their relevance. So either if they are really experienced in one of the challenges, or if they are facing similar challenges, or they have similarities in context. And finally, we will base the matches based on the motivation of the peers. The application form of a call for peer is composed of 3 main fields. So information on the applicant. So we'll ask the applicant to provide information on themselves, but also on their urban authority and on their involvement in such strategies. The second part is the challenges and motivation, and that is where the applicant is asked to state their preferences to a proposed set of guiding questions and explain their interest and experience in tackling the preferred guiding questions. The last section is endorsement of the authorized signatory to endorse the application. Here you can find a sample of guiding questions for the EUI, the first EUI peer review. So it's just a sample. In total, we have 4 sets of guiding questions and 12 guiding questions. The first one is how to engage students of all ages in designing the strategy action plan to enable better sustainable development. And so that question is more related to the participatory component of a set strategy, and it relates to the governance block of the GRC handbook mentioned earlier. The second question is how should the urban authority coordinate and collaborate on strategic planning with surrounding rural authorities, and it relates more to the articulation of territorial scale. So you can really see that it's in line with the building block of territorial dimension. The third one is how can we integrate the wide range of EU programs and initiatives potentially available today to support our set strategy and projects and mix with own resources. And so that question is both on, well, how to best fund your strategy, but also how to integrate the objectives of EU programs within your strategy. So more on the strategic dimension. The last sample question is how to link strategies to EU and global agendas and deliver the green transition. And that's really a question on, well, the strategic dimension of the strategy. So in short, I will show you the key dates and for capacity building activities and what we can offer for support. So as mentioned, the call for application for city-to-city exchanges will last for about 7.5 months. It will close on the 17th of November, but you can already submit an application as we are evaluating application on a rolling basis. So if you submit an application now, we will evaluate it within 4 weeks, and you'll be ready to go from then. The call for cities under review will close on the 29th of May. So you still have 3 weeks to complete your application. It was open for 8 weeks. The call for peers for our first EUI peer review in Thessaloniki on the 28th and 29th of June has just opened and will close on the 30th of May. So it's open for 4 weeks. And finally, we are organizing 2 capacity building events. So the first one on the 7th and 9th of June in Timișoara in Romania. It will discuss the delivery of high quality urban CLLD, so community-led local development. The registration has just now opened, so you can register to if you are interested in participating in the event. The second event, will be on the 4th and 5th of July. It will aim at discussing the support of integrated approaches to urban innovation, and it will be organized in Ljubljana, Slovenia. The registration will open very soon. In terms of support, so we have set up online bilateral consultation. So you can book a 15-minute discussion with one of the capacity building officer, either for city-to-city exchanges or for peer reviews. Those consultations are really to discuss one specific question, and we are only able to offer one consultation per application. So that means that if you are looking to submit an application to city-to-city exchanges and peer reviews, you'll be able to have, well, 2 consultations. You can also contact us with any queries through our capacity building email address that you can see on the screen. And for city-to-city exchanges, you can request contact with an urban authority either from a UIA project or from an urban agenda EU partnership. And you can use the form that is on the link. We also have opportunities for at EUI level. So we have three applicants webinars for our second call for innovative actions. The first one will take place in Brussels on the 15th of June. The second one in Warsaw on the 28th of June, and the third one will be in Ljubljana on the 6th of July. It will be organized back to back with our capacity building event on integrated approaches to urban innovation. You can also help us shape Portico. So Portico is the future European urban knowledge platform, and it will aim at, well, creating a space to exchange on urban knowledge and to create a community for urban practitioners. So if you'd like, you can answer to the survey that we'll share also in the chat. And now we can start the Q&A if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Very clear. And thanks to all of you who have posted your questions so far in the Slido. If you have any more, please keep them coming. So the next half an hour now we will dedicate to answering any questions you have about city-to-city exchanges and peer reviews. So please don't hesitate to post them. Of course, if we run out of questions before half an hour passes, we can also end early. So it's really up to you now how much time you want to spend. So please make sure that you don't leave without posting your questions and getting the information you need. So I can already start going through some of the questions that have come in. So the first question about prioritization. So somebody is asking, can urban authorities from more developed regions also apply? So in this, I mean, I'm not clear if this is about city-to-city exchanges or peer reviews, but I can answer for both. I'll start with city-to-city exchanges. So as I explained earlier, the prioritization for city-to-city exchanges determines only the speed with which your application is evaluated. So it isn't an exclusion criteria. If you are from a more developed region, it simply means that if we receive a number of applications on the same day, those that will come in from less developed regions or transition regions would be treated with priority. So yes, it's absolutely possible for an urban authority from a more developed region to participate in city-to-city exchanges. Similarly for the peer review, so in this case, the prioritization works a bit differently. The peer review selection process is competitive. There is a call with a closing date. We do not evaluate the applications on a rolling basis. We will evaluate all of the interest after the closing date. Therefore, for peer reviews, the level of development does determine your chances of being selected. So you are more likely to be selected if you are a less developed region or a transition region than if you are a more developed region for the peer review. So I hope that that answers your question on the prioritization. Next, so we have a question about the catalogue of moderators for the exchanges peer reviews. Is there any call for facilitators in place, or will there be in due time? So I'll speak first about the city-to-city exchanges. I mentioned that there is a catalogue of moderators. These moderators can be appointed to the applicants after the exchange has been approved, and they get involved to help finalize the agenda, so offering some inputs on how to best structure the exchange. And the moderators would have a range of different thematic experiences also that would be useful. So basically, we've created this catalogue by launching a call for capacity building experts, and we asked the applicants to indicate if they would be interested in being a city-to-city moderator. And we have selected at this point 14 moderators. So the catalogue will be shared with all of the approved applicants, and they will have 2 weeks to contact one or two of the moderators and to let the Permanent Secretariat know which they would like to work with for the exchange. So that's how it works for the city-to-city exchanges. For the peer reviews, it's different. We have a team of 10 peer review experts who all have a substantial experience in peer review methodology and in integrated place-based approaches. And based on the results of the call for cities under review, These experts are allocated to support different cities in the preparation and the delivery of the event. So in the peer review team, we have a range of different language skills, contextual backgrounds, thematic experiences. So this will be taken into account when appointing the peer review experts that would support the city under review. In terms of will we be having another call, at this point we have created a pool of EUI experts and we have additional candidates already in the pool who could be called upon if we need to enlarge the city-to-city moderator or the peer review team, but we may be also organising an open call in the future, though that's not yet planned. We now have a question about city-to-city exchanges. What is the main outcome or the result that the Urban Authority has to provide at the end of the city-to-city exchange events? So basically, at the end of the exchange, we ask the applicant to provide a follow-up report 1 month later. And in this follow-up report, we would ask you to list the participants who joined the exchange, to recap the objectives of the exchange, to outline the agenda, so what was the format and the duration of each of the elements. We would ask you to provide some information on the current situation and the challenge that was to be addressed in the exchange, and to provide some details on the impact you expect from the city-to-city exchange. So taking into account the discussions that took place, the recommendations that were provided, how was the exchange useful? So we would also ask you to detail if you plan to take any follow-up actions following the exchange. So perhaps you would like to request another exchange, or you would like to apply for a peer review, or you may have some other follow-up or spin-off activity that you would like to report back to the Secretariat. So this is a light report. In case your exchange consists of several events, only one report needs to be provided, and there would be only one reimbursement process, even if you have several events. And we would need to validate the quality of the follow-up report in order to process the reimbursement. So that's the short-term follow-up obligation of a city-to-city exchange applicant. I can also add that 6 months after the city-to-city exchange, we would contact the applicant again to ask them whether the input received from the peers contributed to any tangible benefits. So was there an improvement in the design or the implementation of your policy instrument? Were there any improvements in your day-to-day working practices within the applicant institution or among stakeholders? So this will probably be a light survey that we will share with you to help capture the results and any success stories that could be promoted as a result of the city-to-city exchange. So there's a question: who pairs the exchange or the peer review city with a specific facilitator? I think I already mentioned this earlier, but for the city-to-city exchanges, the applicant has the choice from the moderator catalogue as to which person they would like to work with. So they have 2 weeks to contact 1 or 2 of the moderators to confirm their availability and their interest in supporting the exchange. And this, once confirmed, allows EUI to contract the moderator for that mission. And again, in the case of the peer review, it is ourselves at the Permanent Secretariat who appoints the facilitator or the peer review expert that would be following your city. Someone is asking, for city-to-city exchanges, is there any document available listing the examples of SUD strategies which improvement can be considered the subject of the project? So I will mention first, for city-to-city exchanges, there's no exhaustive list of what kind of policy instrument that you can tackle. I mentioned some examples in the presentation. So you could want to tackle your SUD strategy. It could be your integrated territorial investment strategy, your community-led local development strategy. It could be an ERDF or an ESF plus operational program, or there could be some other policy instrument related to sustainable urban development linked to cohesion policy that you want to tackle. What's important is that we see that it is related to integrated place-based approaches and linked to cohesion policy. So in the guidance, you can see different examples of what these policy instruments could be, but there's no exhaustive or prescriptive list of what you must tackle. On the contrary, for peer reviews, it's important to mention that because we are tackling specifically Article 11 ERDF cities, we are only addressing Article 11 strategies, so SUD strategies in the peer review process. If you want to have a sense of what an SUD strategy is, you can look at the Joint Research Centre's database called the Stratboard, where every SUD strategy in the 2014-2020 period is listed. So in essence, it's the next generation of these strategies that you will find in the Stratboard that we will be tackling in the peer review. And it is indeed a requirement that you are tackling one of these Article 11 strategies in order to be selected. So someone is asking, can I repeat what are the expected outputs from the city-to-city exchanges? So essentially, the applicant has to deliver the following elements. Before submitting the application, the applicant needs to identify, discuss with the peers, and put together the application. Once the application is submitted and the exchange is implemented, this follow-up report I spoke about earlier needs to be drafted within 1 month of the exchange. So this is the main output that the applicant has to deliver. Accompanying the follow-up report, the applicant also needs to submit the financial claim. So this is basically the reimbursement form that allows us to pay out the different lump sums. And then 6 months after the exchange, the applicant would also receive this very light evaluation survey. So they are the outputs that would need to be delivered by the applicant towards the Permanent Secretariat. So there was another question in the rolling based process. Can we submit a proposal and then after rejection, can we resubmit the improved proposal once again? Yes, indeed. It is possible to resubmit a rejected city-to-city exchange application. Because the application form is very short, very light, because we are turning around the evaluation process very quickly, we have no fulfillment of conditions process. There's no healing procedure or any possibility to correct small problems in the application. So if we are not able to approve the application, we will simply provide a list of the issues that prevented the approval, and we would invite the applicant to resubmit if there was still potential for this application to be approved. So with this in mind, we do allow for faster processing of resubmitted applications to avoid the time elapsing between you wanting to do an exchange and it being approved for implementation. So concerning city-to-city exchanges, should the applicant and the peer anticipate the expenses for the exchange? Is there an initial installment? So no, there is no pre-financing either for city-to-city exchanges or for peer reviews. We're talking mainly about travel, accommodation, per diem costs, which are relatively small in the scope of EU projects. So if we think about innovative actions projects financed by EUI, which can be 4 or 5 million euro ERDF, there is a significant pre-financing possibility here because these are infrastructural investments. Here we're talking about light exchanges. The overall amount is a few thousands of euros, so we don't have any pre-financing facility in order to keep the administrative burden light on the Secretariat. So it is on a reimbursement basis. It's not on any real cost basis. There are the lump sum unit costs that you will find in the guidance related to the staff costs. So the daily rate for the peers, 350 euro per day, the travel costs being a unit cost per distance band, and the per diem being a unit rate per country. So you can find all of these details on the costs in the guidance. Somebody is asking, is it possible to participate in a city-to-city exchange, not with a policy instrument, but with a project idea, so that the peers will evaluate our project? So it's essential in the application form that you name a specific policy instrument that will be improved thanks to the exchange. With this in mind, the exchange could tackle the implementation or the design of a specific project, but that would have to be completely embedded within this policy instrument. So if, for instance, your policy instrument would be the SUD strategy, it's possible that the exchange would focus on how to design in the best way an integrated project for mobility that would be financed by the SUD strategy. But an application that does not clearly explain the policy framework will not be able to be approved. Somebody is asking, in the self-assessment tool for SUD strategies, no strategy can be associated with our city. Are we allowed to participate anyway? I think what you're talking about is for peer reviews. You're not finding that there was an SUD strategy included in the JRC Strat Board in the previous period. So the Strat Board is not the way that we check your eligibility for a peer review. We simply present it to explain to you that these are examples of SUD strategies in the previous period. So these are the strategies that were designed by the cities concerned by Article 7 in the previous period. So Article 7 in 2014-2020 has become Article 11 in 2021-2027. So you can see by looking at the Strat Board what those SUD strategies were. So these were designed by the urban authorities in order to direct the ERDF, ESF funding that was ring-fenced for sustainable urban development. So to answer your question specifically, there's no explicit link between the Strat Board and your eligibility for the peer review. However, you must be selected at member state level as an Article 11 city. If you do not know if you are an Article 11 city, you need to check with your managing authority for cohesion policy funds, because there is a process underway in each member state to designate the Article 11 cities. We have a list which we have compiled together with DG Regio of the Article 11 cities that have been appointed so far. At this point, there are 211 of them that we are aware of. So we encourage you to check with your managing authority in case you have any doubts about whether you are appointed as an Article 11 city. Someone is asking, for the city-to-city exchange call, do the applicant and peers need to cooperate beforehand? Is it necessary to name the city and the peers in the application? Yes, it is required for the applicant to identify the peers before submitting the application and to confirm that they're interested in implementing the exchange. As we explained, there is an endorsement that needs to be ticked at the end of the application form, whereby the participating urban authorities confirm that they will implement the exchange if approved. So it would be necessary to confirm this with the peer urban authorities in order to fill out this endorsement. So it is necessary to name the city that will participate in the application, and we also ask for you to indicate the institution and the person so that we can understand how the proposed peers are relevant for tackling the exchange topic. So we're coming towards the end of the questions now. I have another one here related to the peer reviews in Interreg Europe, which I'm going to tackle now. If you have any more questions, please keep them coming. So somebody is asking, is it possible to benefit from the peer review process via Interreg Europe? Can you tell the difference so that we can choose accordingly? So indeed, there is a peer review service offered by the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. I can point out some of the main differences as I understand them and give a suggestion on what would be the right way to differentiate between the tools. I also see that there are some colleagues from Interreg Europe in the webinar, so if they want to clarify, I'm also happy to give the floor over to add any details on this point. So I can speak first about the EUI peer review. So as Zoe presented, our peer reviews are bringing together 3 to 5 urban authorities who are reviewed in parallel in one event. So the fact that there are 3 to 5 urban authorities going through this process together in the same event allows them to meet with other cities that are undergoing the same process and to build their network in the event. As we mentioned, the primary purpose of the peer review is to review the SUD strategy of the city under review, but we also foresee a session over the 2-day peer review where the cities that are being reviewed are able to review other cities. So basically, the knowledge receiver becomes the knowledge giver in the EUI peer review for one of the sessions, which is a good win-win dimension that can bring an extra element of interest and added value to the peer review. In terms of the methodology, the EUI peer review is anchored in the JRC guidance for developing SUD strategies. So as I explained, the peer review is only open to Article 11 cities that are developing an SUD strategy. So this is one specific type of policy instrument that we are tackling. And for this specific SUD strategy, we do have this very useful guidance from the Commission, the JRC, on how to best design the SUD strategy. So because we have this handbook, we are able to structure the peer review and to provide a very well-structured process of benchmarking the strategy and providing recommendations. In addition, our peer reviews are very much focused on integrated place-based approaches. So rather than being open to any thematic area, each of these strategies and the peer reviews are anchored in mainstreaming this integrated place-based approach to sustainable urban development. To help us with this, we will always have the participation of staff from the Joint Research Centre or the European Commission with us at the peer review, who will help provide information on the latest state of play of sustainable urban development and how to interpret the guidelines. In addition, I would say prior to the peer review event, which itself lasts 2 days, EUI has foreseen this pre-peer review webinar, a preparatory webinar, where already 2 weeks before the event, the participants, so the cities under review and the peers, come together and they already start to reframe the questions that have been identified by the cities under review. So this allows the participants to already have a clearer sense of what it is that the city under review is faced with as a challenge. And this allows the participants to better prepare themselves for the event itself. In addition, we have a progress webinar 6 months after the peer review event, which will allow all of the participants to come together and share their experiences about what went well and how they benefited from the peer review, whether they have any ongoing needs. In addition, because in EUI we have the city-to-city exchange activity running in parallel, we are able to provide a fast-track opportunity for the cities under review to have a follow-up meeting in person with one of the peers or more than one of the peers to explore one of the recommendations in detail. So that's a recap of the EUI peer review. I can say a few words on the Interreg Europe peer review, and again, if the colleagues from Interreg Europe would like to write in the chat or to take the floor to correct or to complete anything that I say, you're very welcome to do so. You can please just write in the chat and we can unmute you. So in the case of Interreg Europe peer reviews, these are 2-day events. They take place on site in the location of the authority that's benefiting from the peer review. So Interreg Europe is focusing on supporting regional development authorities, also linked with cohesion policy, but the managing authorities of the structural funds programs are seen as a core target group in Interreg Europe, whereas in EUI, we're only serving urban authorities. So for instance, if you are a managing authority, it would make sense to go to Interreg Europe. The Interreg Europe peer reviews are also mainly capitalizing on the good practices that are identified in Interreg Europe projects. And I understand that they're opening up the peers beyond the projects only when there are no relevant experiences available within the projects. So if you're interested particularly in accessing the knowledge contained in Interreg Europe projects, then the Interreg Europe peer review would be the way to go. If there are any more details that those Interreg Europe colleagues would like to add, please feel free. I would say that in terms of the policy instruments that are tackled in the Interreg Europe peer review, there's no specific focus on the SUD strategies. Any policy instrument related to regional development policy can be addressed in the peer review. So I think there's a broader approach in Interreg Europe, whereas in EUI peer reviews, it's very much focused on the Article 11 cities and the SUD strategies with these specific tools put in place by the Commission to support cities with those SUD strategies. So we have another question. Is there a tool available for finding the appropriate peer city to be named in the application form? At this point, we only have very light support available to help applicants looking for peers. As we presented in the presentation, we have a form that allows you to request an introduction to an urban authority involved in innovative actions projects financed by EUI or in urban agenda for the EU partnerships. So this is one support that you can use to make contact with a peer. So if you access the form that was linked on the slide, you will be able to see a list to the different innovative actions projects and urban agenda for the EU partnerships. And by looking at the themes covered by those projects, you may find a suitable peer. In addition, it's important to mention that EUI will be building as much as possible on the experiences of URBACT 4, URBACT that is supporting capacity building for sustainable development and has been an important contributor to developing the integrated place-based approach. So we're expecting URBACT cities to be a primary contributor of peers for the city-to-city exchanges. With this in mind, if you see that you would like to get in touch with a specific URBACT network city, and if you don't find their contact details on the website, we have agreed with the national URBACT points that you can contact them directly to have an introduction to the city. So this is what's possible in the short term. There's also, for instance, tools such as the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform Good Practice Database, whereby you can see different good practices submitted by public authorities in Europe on different thematic issues. This could help you identify a relevant peer, but please note that it is important that the peer is an urban authority in order to be eligible for EUI city-to-city exchanges. In the long run, we are planning to develop a peer search platform on the Portico tool that Zoe mentioned, which will facilitate even more this process of identifying peers. So someone is asking, can we use Portico for city-to-city exchanges? Indeed, once the peer search platform will be available on Portico, and as different materials will be hosted on Portico showing different case studies from different urban development settings, this will also be a good source of inspiration for potential peers. So I see one more question waiting. Please keep them coming if you have any more. Someone is asking, can you repeat which kind of activities cannot be financed as part of city-to-city exchanges? So what you will find in the guidance is that we say other forms of assistance and consultancy that go beyond peer learning among urban authorities cannot be supported. So for instance, developing studies, organizing conferences, training courses. So anything that goes beyond sharing an existing experience or idea of an urban authority with another one as part of a peer learning approach is what cannot be financed. So you can see this reference in section 2.3.2 of the guidance for city-to-city exchanges. So I don't see any more questions at this point waiting on Slido. In case there are any last ones that you haven't submitted, please feel free to do so. What we could do, Zoe, to add another minute is just to pull up once more the slide, maybe with the upcoming dates or the open opportunities, if that's possible, just to recap on how people can get involved in the different activities. So Zoe, while you're getting that slide online, I see there's another question here. How do we know that we're an Article 11 city? So as I explained, there is a process underway in each member state to select the Article 11 cities that will be in charge of developing these strategies that we're calling SUD strategies. In some member states, these cities are being directly appointed. In others, for instance, Spain, we know that there will be a call organised and that cities will need to apply to the call to have their strategy selected. So because we don't have a complete list of Article 11 cities, because the selection is not yet done in each member state, we must advise you to make contact with your relevant managing authority for cohesion policy funds to check whether you are an Article 11 city. If you are already involved in Article 7 ERDF in the previous period, so if you developed one of these SUD strategies that you can find included in the JRC Strat Board, this is an indication that you may be eligible as an Article 11 city in the current period, but I must repeat that you must be selected as an Article 11 city in order to participate in a peer review. It is not required to be Article 11 to participate in a city-to-city exchange, so the access is a bit more broad for the city-to-city exchange. Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of the questions that are currently available on Slido. As I mentioned earlier, we're planning to update the website with a list of frequently asked questions based on what you've asked here today. In case you have any more questions, as Zoe presented, you're very welcome to request a consultation, a bilateral consultation, to tackle any specific questions you have about the city-to-city exchanges or the peer reviews. It is important that you have pre-identified your questions. The idea is that these are not general discussions, but that you've already read the guidance and you have some specific points that you'd like to tackle in this 20-minute meeting. Otherwise, you can also email us on capacitybuilding@urbaninitiative.eu. And maybe, Zoe, just to finish, we can come back onto the slide with the upcoming opportunities, just to remind you of the dates for the calls. So we have the city-to-city exchange call open until 17th of November at noon. As I mentioned, don't wait to submit your application. They will be processed and approved on a rolling basis within a month. For the peer reviews, we're looking now for up to 15 cities that will be reviewed in the second part of this year. We'll be organising 3 peer reviews in autumn-winter, and for this, the call is closing on the 29th of May at noon. In parallel, we are populating now a list of peers that will participate in our first peer review in Thessaloniki on the 28th and the 29th of June. The call for peers opened yesterday. It will be open for 1 month, so please check it out on the Urban Initiative website. And in case you have any questions, do not hesitate to email us. And again, a final word, as Zoe mentioned, we have these 2 first capacity building events upcoming on delivering high quality urban community-led local development in Timișoara, Romania. And then 4th and 5th of July, back to back with the Seminar for Innovative Actions call, we are delivering an event on supporting an integrated approach to urban innovation in Ljubljana. I can mention also that our colleagues in Interreg Europe have provided a link in the WebEx chat where you can find more information about the Interreg Europe peer review and whether or not that might be an interesting service for you to check out. With that, I can only thank you for participating, so many of you, in this webinar. We hope that it answered your questions. You can see in Slido we do have a live poll whether or not you plan to participate in one of our activities. We'd be very happy to hear whether or not you plan to apply or whether you're looking for more information. In case you'd like to leave any other comments, please feel free to do so. We're always happy to hear your feedback about the webinar and the tools. And with that, I will just thank you again for participating and wish you a good day. Thank you all. Goodbye.